Hello, Cleantechers. I hope you're well. We are back with our sixth quarterly Cleantech Editors Roundtable, and we are here for an end of the year look back. We have three wonderful editors, Tim Sylvia joining us from PV Magazine. Unfortunately, Darius Snickus with Recharge is down for the count with the after effects of his COVID booster. We got Heather Clancy from Green Biz and Zach Sheehan from Clean Technica. So I'm just so grateful that all of you have joined us, and to the editors for joining, because I was just sharing with them backstage that this is one of the most fun things that we do in the course of a quarter, is to have these folks on and hear from them, because we get to ask them questions, and usually it's the other way around. So it's a great deal of fun here. So I'd like to start off by just asking the three of you, what is your summary on how Clean Economy did in 2021? Heather, let me start with you.
Oh, I always go first. Hi, everyone. It's great to be back. And so I cover so many different topics. I could take up the whole hour responding, but I think my main overall, my main thought would be that I feel like it gained a lot more respect from the mainstream economists or businesses. I do feel like it was a breakthrough year for companies to realize that this is like an opportunity for them. Some of the big corporations that were thinking about, oh, this is going to cost me more money to invest in these things. Now, many of them, like automakers, for example, take them as a big example. You know, everyone started the year like very few models. Now, all of the mainstream automakers have EV models. So I think so I would say that like this was the year that the respect started to happen and or the exploitation, if you will. And also that this was the year in which the fossil fuel money started chasing this money big time in order to take advantage of what's going on. So from, the biggest example I will say would be carbon capture projects that just the money chasing, and now of course the EV charging networks with oil companies buying into those. So that would be my main summary. Otherwise, I would take way too long.
That's okay. We have plenty of time, but I hear you. And is it mostly corporates, Heather, that you thought the respect got onboarded?
The corporates, but also the money. It used to be at the beginning of, and I use the word climate tech, but it used to be at the beginning of the year, it was pretty much the traditional climate tech venture capitalists who were chasing this. There were very niche boutiques chasing that kind of investment. Now it's all of the mainstream, venture capital firms have some kind of money in this, as well as the private equity firms. I mean, it's just the money went mainstream as well.
So in other words, the big generalists got into the game.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Tim, what's your verdict on 2021? You can go as deep as you want, as wide as you want.
Yeah, sure. Just like Heather, I cover a wide variety of things, so much it's hard to keep up with sometimes. And I think a lot of what kind of kept coming back to me this year is A, definitely the respect point, but she hopped into that. So B, it feels like progress is on the horizon and progress is possible, but there's always infighting on the way to progress. And obviously we're going to jump into Build Back Better later, but that is kind of the definition of infighting. And something that I followed pretty closely that, fared similarly was the establishment of new credits in Illinois, which was a huge thing when that passed. But as we know, it was marred by almost half a year of bad faith negotiating, kind of not being able to cooperate on any sort of comprehensive legislation, to the point where the initial working groups that were sent in to kind of get that going didn't work, and it had to be sent back to legislators. So, I think that's kind of the issue that we face here is, you look across the board and support for clean energy and the clean economy, on the individual level with most people is pretty high, and it's, risen every year, but it's the steps that get us to that point and the actual points of policy and specific legislation that hold us back. So I think there is generally a positive environment, for this transition to a more clean economy, eventually going towards the goals that the Biden administration has expressed. But the path to there is not just arduous, but pretty, it can get almost annoying, at a time. It feels like there's all this opportunity, and then it's nitpicking on the way there. So I guess that was my biggest takeaway from the year.
Good. And I'm going to want to ask you about California, the impact of the California outcome later in this conversation. But Zach, your verdict on 2021, and Heather, I want to see if he can give an answer without mentioning a certain spacebound entrepreneur. We're gonna see, because
yeah,
I
had no intention of going down that road today, but I just want to circle back. Did you say something at the beginning about Darius being involved in a coup attempt or something? Was this what
No,
you were
no,
starting to?
I mispronounced COVID.
Yeah.
So
I think
he has a
fair
body
game
and
to
he-
roast
he-
anyone who's not on the call, in my opinion.
100%.
And regarding Heather, he goes to you first because he trusts you the most. That's obvious, but
I think it's alphabetical.
well, it might be that too, but I love your framing of it being of the respect thing. I think that's a really good way to put it. I think I'm going to focus on the EV industry because we've got people. Tim here is going to focus on solar more, and I don't want to say something stupid in front of him, and you've got other topics, but I think that, the big story in 2020 with EVs was tremendous growth in market share in Europe and a bit in China. And, there was a question, what's going to happen in 2021? It's going to level off, it's going to drop, it's going to keep going. And I think for the most part, it's been bigger than anyone expected. So, it's sort of like 2020, they hit certain requirements to not face steep fines. 2021, just the wave took it away. Like it was just like, this is what people want, is EVs. And you see this dramatic EV market share in Europe, strong in China. And even in the US, we hit a record EV market share of 5.6% in September in the US, which is really a big step up for the US market. And I think, with the F-150 Lightning, with the Mach-E, getting much greater production increase in the coming year or so, with other hot models, the Ioniq 5, or there's really a lot of models that have the potential to really jack up that 5.6 figure, even in the US, which is the hardest large market for electric vehicles right now. But across the board, I think what you said, there's a respect.
Zach, can I just ask you, what makes the US the hardest market, in your opinion?
Yeah. Oh, it's a few things, but it's simple. So the US has incentives, but Europe and China have incentives and requirements. If you don't hit the requirements, you pay steep fines that are going to put you out of business. The US has no real strong requirements. California, some places have it. So without that stick, they don't have to do it. And there's a limited battery supply because no one had committed enough early on enough. So with a limited global battery supply, they're going to meet demand in Europe and China first. Also, it's easier to sell in Europe because of the way autos are sold there. It's more of they order months in advance, they get their car, when it's available. The US has this, kind of impulse buying habit of, you go to the dealer and you buy what's on the lot. And that's not really the best way to be sold EVs or to get EVs. So it's a combo of these different factors. But I'd say the biggest one is, if you don't sell enough EVs in Europe, you're out of business. And US, you can do whatever you want, more or less.
So a question, if I could, for you and possibly Heather as well. Given the events of this year, is the switch from ICE to electric, is it baked in?
Yeah, it's definitely baked. Even in the US, it might be arriving at that point, which is why you see GM and Ford and everyone wanting to be, the leader in EVs, because they know it's important for not right now, but down the road. So it's baked in. Yeah, it's definitely, it's hit the tipping point, the disruption point in Europe for sure, and China, and soon in the US. If yeah.
Heather, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the big indicator is the CapEx that's going into these battery research and development facilities and production plants on the behalf of all of the big automakers. I mean, the Ford is billions of dollars spending on new plants and batteries. So that's pretty baked in.
Okay, got it. All right, so let me then go from the rear view mirror to the windshield. No pun intended. What are the trends you're going to be following and the things that you expect 2022 to bring? Tim, can I start with you?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing to kick off 2022 will be to see what happens with the NEM3 vote in California, which I believe is scheduled for the end of January at this point. That's going to be a hugely impactful policy for the biggest residential solar market in the country. I believe as of now, we've got massive expansions going on in Florida and Texas, and obviously they've caught up on the utility scale, but not so much on the residential scale. Another trend that we've seen emerging on the solar side is states committing a lot more heavily into community solar. We've had New York kind of paving the way on community solar for the past 2 years or so. Maryland just made their pilot program permanent. New Jersey did as well. Maryland did in 2021. New Jersey's made their community solar program permanent as well. And outside of that, an issue that we've just kind of heard of and seen is there's a lot of talk about the effects that large format modules are going to have on project development. Obviously, they bring down costs significantly, or they promise to, and in turn they don't really add as much as was maybe perceived on the tracker side, with additional hardware to keep them mounted. But in speaking with some tracker manufacturers recently, they were kind of saying that, yeah, all this potential is here, but they're not seeing as many large format modules in the field as they expected at this time, and a lot more is coming on the 182 wafer rather than the 210, and that's all tied up with the global supply chain issues, shipping issues. So it'll be kind of interesting to see this technology that for 2.5 years has been promised to, revolutionize how large scale plants are planned, financed and developed, to see if it finally delivers on those promises, or what's going to be happening here. And in those conversations, we did hear some confidence that it would be moving forward, but stagnation in development across the industry is something that everyone's kind of starting to see and is very fearful of. And, we don't know what the full picture is yet.
If you're a betting person, how does the California net metering decision play out, and how does it impact throughout the rest of the year?
Well, I am a betting person, and I would like to be hopeful that some of the weaknesses of the proposal that we saw released recently would not pass, but the cynic in me does not think that we will see for us solar folks exactly what we want in it. I think it will be closer to the kind of gutted proposal that we saw last week, and obviously that has huge ramifications across a state that has mandated all new homes have to have solar on them. So how do you have that mandate and then entirely devalue what's on that mandate? It's a bit of a paradox. So, if California leads the way in solar, and a lot of solar policies are developed, across the country, looking at California, and in some instances looking in Hawaii at how they institute their policy, what does that mean? We've seen net metering attacked in a lot of southern, but not just southern states. A lot of, traditionally fossil heavy states have attacked net metering. And, if the state that has led the country in solar for however many years is saying, they're devaluing net metering, what does that say for the rest of the country, especially in states where its kind of efficacy is already at question?
And I have to ask this, as an observer who's focused on the solar industry, how did we get here? I mean, I think there was a little bit of denial that I sensed in the solar sector coming around the bend to this decision. And I think there's a lot of kind of people getting up and still dusting their clothes off after this knock. How do you think the biggest state market in the country turned on net metering?
It all comes down to, what kind of value of solar is looked at and what that policy is built on. And I know the value of solar in California has kind of been deemed to be lower because of, how much is on, how much has been integrated into the grid already. And the common arguments are always that the solar customers are unfairly shifting costs to non-solar customers, which, let's pull up 15 studies that disprove that. But I think it all comes down to a bit of a disconnect between what the true value of solar is and what the kind of pushed and what the fed to us value of solar is. And, the value of solar studies that policy is being founded upon are not necessarily objective ones and are not necessarily ones that are being developed with the consumer's interest in mind.
I fully agree with everything he said. And I would also just highlight, there's that famous report some years ago, the death spiral report that the Edison Electric Institute put out. And I think ever since then, they have been toying with different messaging and different ways of framing how they need to kill, why they need to kill net metering, and sort of brushing aside the value of solar arguments, the value of solar studies that show a much higher value of solar than they're putting on it. And I think there's sort of they've sort of found, okay, this sort of resonates with this group of, this works. And they sort of put together a messaging package that's like, this should really work. And we're ready to go for it. And that's the way it feels to me, but completely agree with everything Tim already said. And I just, one thing I've seen is it's sort of like we've gone full circle now. Alabama's leading California, leading the dragon with solar policy.
Right. And just to build on that real quick, we covered an excellent report that came out earlier this year that has kind of shown the rhetoric between state, regional, and federal actions to kind of devalue net metering, devalue DER. And it's so fun. How in the NFL they talk about coaching trees, all these different coaches started because Bill Parcells had this idea and everybody. Well, it's kind of like that from our perspective too, where you see, anti-residential solar campaigns in Florida, North Carolina, even some of the ones in California, they all come back to that initial death spiral study and some Edison Institute meetings where they basically laid out what the agenda is going to be from about a decade ago. So it's like we can't get away from these core arguments that have persisted for a decade.
What's so funny is their argument is essentially if you want to use less of our product, we need you to pay us for the privilege. I believe, Heather, you're in New Jersey, is that correct? Yeah, I think they have a term for that type of business in New Jersey. It's not utility net metering. So we'll leave it at that there. Heather, what would you say, what are you looking for in 2022?
Sorry, the sun keeps moving in my office. Speaking of solar, but there's plenty of solar right here on my house. So I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. My 3 things that I'm watching. Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, just what would you say? What are you expecting 2022 to bring? And are there specific trends that you're going to keep an eye out for?
So one thing that I think is kind of plays to both those questions is, and I know I'm all over the map because I cover software, I cover sustainable aviation fuel and so forth. So I'm like all across the board. But one of the things I'm following most closely is the way that corporations are measuring and managing their carbon reduction targets and their actual emissions. So the biggest sort of breakthrough software category that 2021 saw was carbon accounting software, if you want to use a sort of a simple term to say it. And at the same time, we've also seen some of the big enterprise software companies go after the same category. So Microsoft, Salesforce, SAP, ServiceNow all have now in their software development portfolios some kind of enterprise management software focused on this. So one of the things I'm going to be watching closely is sort of the maturation and probably consolidation of that category very quickly. I mean, like way quicker than I've seen a lot of other software categories. This is my background, so following software for a long time. So I see that as being a really important trend for my audience, the corporations, because that's the biggest thing is how do you measure this stuff accurately? How do you then act on that information? And then how do you push that across your entire supply chain? So then they need that kind of visibility because it's still very much a spreadsheet world. The second thing, kind of related, I suppose, is I'm really very focused on the carbon capture and removal deals that are happening. It's like Swiss Re's big commitment to buying offtake, if you will, from the carbon removal plant that Climeworks built in Iceland. And, that's the biggest example for a direct air capture, but I'm really particularly interested in also industrial capture technologies at the plant level or at the, campus level or something like that, where companies can actually act on their manufacturing emissions and, oh, by the way, potentially have a revenue source from what they've captured, because there's also the carbon tech world where there's a lot of startups trying to figure out how to use carbon dioxide as a feedstock for fuels, for, put it in cement and so forth. So that's sort of another area. And then finally, I'm really fascinated by what's going on with sustainable aviation fuel right now, just in terms of the commitments by the big airlines. So that's an area that I'm going to be watching.
Let me ask you a follow-up question, Heather. I think in the last roundtable, you said you're going to keep an eye on how, I'm paraphrasing, how much reliability, transparency, integrity there would be in how large corporate sustainability committers would have in the way they follow through. Since that time, have you seen reasons for optimism or reasons for skepticism, or not enough to change your mind one way or another?
I'm kind of in between. It depends on the company, to be quite honest. I think the do-gooders are more acutely aware that they have to be far more specific with their claims, and also talk about what they're doing on a far more regular basis. So you do see some companies changing their sort of disclosure cycles in order to be better at that. And then some of these loans that you've seen them make, so these companies that are borrowing money against their sustainability claims, that's going to be a good indicator. So like anyone that's putting money out there, and if they're not going to make, their goal, they're not going to get that financing, in the place that they thought. So I think the ones that have linked it to a goal, I kind of have more faith that they're going to get it done, because if they're not, they're going to pay for it, essentially. So, it really, pick your company name and it's going to be different.
Second to two follow-ups. I've nursed a fairly healthy skepticism about carbon capture. To me, most of the pronouncements have been basically throwing money into holes in the ground. The thing out in Illinois, which was, it started, then it stopped, and started again, then it stopped. And to me, it just looks like it's an excuse to just keep polluting. We're going to stuff carbon dioxide under the ground, and oh, by the way, none of it will get out. But I don't hear that skepticism from you. Are there reasons you're optimistic that carbon capture can work?
I am optimistic that we need to have it. I can't, we're not going to flip a switch and get to this completely clean economy. And if we don't have this stuff in place, we're not going to make any progress until we get those other technologies. So I know that there's the whole argument of this is going to perpetuate, but we need it. We need it on like take a truck. So really interesting company, Remora, which is trying to capture the emissions on trucks and therefore address it there. Is it crazy? I don't know, but they're trying, and there's a lot of organizations that aren't going to just take their entire diesel fleet off the road right away. they have to have some of these things working in conjunction with. I don't see it's an either or. I see it has to happen. It's an and. We need this and this. So I'm talking about the industrial level, and that the sort of like I'm more interested in the manufacturer, like the smaller point level solutions. I'm less optimistic. I'm a little bit skeptical about the direct air capture, but especially given the money behind it. But I feel like we need these things. So I get your skepticism, but we need it. That's my opinion.
One of the things I do not envy you all in your line of work is having to decide where a new technology, practice, or breakthrough sits on the number line of fully credible or obviously greenwashing. These are my assignments, obviously, but I think by any measure, ExxonMobil's algae technology is much more advertising fodder than it is real progress on anything. I think those guys remain absolutely committed to selling the last drop of oil that can be pulled out of planet Earth. And then you go all the way over the other side and you look at, BP is putting money into Light Source. It's now Light Source BP, and they've got this huge pipeline, and they're rapidly growing, and it looks real.
And they just bought an EV charging network.
And so somewhere, let me turn this into a question. How do the three of you, each of the three of you, how do you decide how serious a pitch is versus just PR nonsense?
I'll
Tim,
jump in because I have to leave.
Zach, go ahead.
I have to leave in a second, but that's a very tough thing. And I would say we get roasted a lot for stuff that's too far on the not feasible side, most strongly by certain members of my own team who are much better engineers and much smarter than I am. So, it's very hard. We definitely have stopped covering a lot of early tech stuff. We try to mostly focus on what's actually on the market for real because of that challenge. But then we also have people cover early scientific stuff and funding. I'll just go back real quickly because I have to run to pick up my daughter, but just the three things to watch was definitely the California solar study story, which we talked about. Also, there's basically 3 or maybe 4 autonomous driving kind of avenues that different companies are pursuing. And they're all, I would say they're all sort of hitting a kind of make or break period. And it might be 2022 where either they start making some serious progress or they get really dumped in the trash. So I think there's really, I don't have to spend a whole hour probably talking about this different 3 or 4 different approaches, but that's one big thing I'm watching. And then not about this coming year, but about future years. I'm very interested in what happens with battery minerals, because those need several years of development to come to be ready for goals that are set in 2025, 2020, 2030. And historically, it's been really too slow committing to projects, and miners are just not going to start working on projects that take 5 years or 7 years to develop without strong, firm commitments. And we've already seen the price of lithium jack up double in a year. It's jacked up enormously in the past year, but you have that risk with lithium and nickel and others longer term if there aren't really strong commitments. So I'm looking forward to seeing real firm commitments. And you see some from certain automakers. Volvo Cars just made one with Northvolt, but there's I'm looking to see a lot of those in 2022. And if we don't see them, I'll be a bit worried, but I think we will see a lot of those kind of things. As far as I responded to the other question, and I have to unfortunately jump off to go get my daughter from school, but I will definitely listen to their responses later.
Okay.
Happy holidays.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays,
You too.
Zach. Thanks for joining us. Tim, how do you manage how do you gauge your skepticism meter when you get a new pitch on a big breakthrough technology? I suppose then the amount of flim-flammery that can come your way is somewhat more limited than Heather, since GreenBiz is such a wider spectrum publication than PV Magazine. But what do you think?
So I think the biggest, at least for me, promises that I see are always in the revolutionary new storage technology, the battery that can deliver energy for 28 hours or whatever, or what's being promised. And I think it comes down to, you got to look at what's being promised versus what is currently commercially viable, what's currently viable out in the field, or what's on the, hinge of being viable that might not be at commercialization yet, but the technology's proven and it's there. And you got to kind of leverage what you know with what you're being promised. And I think you also have to look into, who's investing in this, who is pitching this to us, what is their goal of promising this technology? It's basic. You got to take an objective lens with everything, because I think, we're definitely in an industry or across the clean energy industry. I think it's a hopeful industry, and with hope, you do get the idea of taking advantage of that hope with, here's the battery, or here's the thing that's going to revolutionize everything. And you got to think, why are they framing it in this way? Who wants them to push it in this way? And, maybe what is this master pitch hiding in the background? What other work is being done that maybe isn't so progressive that they're using this massive pitch to kind of distract from. So I think with every technology, with every new promise, you just got to take a very, very critical look at it. And half the time it comes down to, okay, you've got this battery, you've got your technology, let's sit down, let's talk about it. Let me see your science. Let me see, let me see it in practice. What are your pilots? Who's agreeing to work on this with you? What labs are you working with to test this technology? Or is it just your pie in the sky idea that gets a fun little headline,
Okay, Heather?
Yeah, actually, I want to respond to what Tim was just saying on that, which is, I think, one thing to remember, and I don't know how, Tim, what your philosophy is on this, but every call that I do, every interview that I do is not necessarily a promise of coverage.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important so that partly helps me as well. Like I have conversations that I can't tell from the pitch. I need to have a conversation. And I think just generally speaking, I personally need to do more of that. It's very hard to do because we're getting slammed with so many pitches to begin with, but I feel like having a dialogue is important. So that's like one way to help filter. For me, it's like for the Green Biz team, a lot of it has to do with following the money. So like, it just is a really concrete example. Stripe has added 4 companies to their portfolio. They have this program where they help, they're putting money into carbon removal, and they have 4 new companies that they're supporting. And so now, as a result, I'm going to look at those companies more closely. Like they've got sort of a customer behind them. They've got some money behind them. For me, like, even though those companies are pretty early stage, they're not like research stage, like new, crazy new battery thing. But I kind of follow that a little bit. And that's one way for us to make a decision one way or another.
I have to ask you both this. I don't think I've ever asked our panels before. If you had a ballpark, how many pitches a day do you get on an average day? If you just had to ballpark it.
15, maybe 10, 15. See, it's a difference between, you'll get pitched anything. Serious pitches, less, but just, buckshot, shooting at a wall, throwing darts anywhere it'll stick. Probably 15 at minimum.
Heather?
It's much higher. I love how you put that though. The buckshot ones, I would say like 75. I mean, I literally get like that much email a day.
Yeah.
A lot of which is total garbage. It has nothing to do with either A, what Green Biz covers, or B, what I personally follow. It's just kind of, and then of course you get the 5 follow-ups about it. Did you get my pitch? What do you think? And you're kind of like, oh my gosh. Anyway, of those, I would say there's probably, maybe a 20% of them are worth us following up in some way, or I'll pass it along and I'll say, hey, can you check this out? Yeah.
All right. So what I'm hearing is, so if 20% is, you get about 75 a day, Tim's getting about 15, and I'm hearing like roughly a quarter to a third of each number is more, it's weighty enough to sort of be worth checking out potentially. Okay. I think I might write a blog post about this saying, this is your daily competition. So it'd be really interesting. All right. And we do have an anonymous attendee who has asked you all, are you attending and covering CES 2022? Have you all heard of X-Row Technologies display in booth 6019?
No and no.
I'm not making a comment about the quality of that pitch. I'm just relaying it because I'm a faithful moderator. So I think anonymous attendee, no, they're not covering it, and no, they have not heard of it. So, all right. There's a reporter 10 years from now. She's going to write the definitive look back for Atlantic Monthly, 10,000 words on the impact of the Biden administration on moving the U.S. economy to sustainability. You're going to leave her some guidance in a time vault at the end of this year. Tim Sylvia, what are you going to tell her?
You go first.
Oh boy, I love leading this. Let's see. So she's going to be covering. Well, first of all, I'd ask her what ended up happening with Build Back Better, because I think it's all founded in. I think you can't really start the story of the next 5-10 years without what's going on with that. And, I think it all comes back to Build Back Better. I think that's the framework for all of this. And then, what tech kind of emerges as the real deal, what tech kind of goes beyond that potential stage into the applicable, whether it's carbon capture, whether it's any of these new revolutionary storages, and something that Zach was getting to earlier, it would be the market share of EV. I think electrifying transportation, especially shipping and larger scale transportation, has incredible potential to rapidly shift our decarbonization efforts. The best way to sell electric vehicles is to have someone see all their neighbors driving them, or one of their neighbors driving them. So I think that's kind of all where it starts.
All right, Heather Clancy, what is your time vault guidance to this reporter to open 10 years from now?
So this is what I told you at the beginning of this call, off before everyone was on, that I'm feeling very cynical. So so I actually am not.
Joe Manchin will do that to you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. I'm going to be, my answer is very practical. So I'm going with what's already been accomplished. So what I would tell the person to do, to look at, is closely look at the supply chain and trade policies that have been declared and that are being worked on. So specifically the things that make it simpler for organizations to set up supply chains locally. I mean, and you've seen that, like I said, the big US automakers, lots and lots of money going into EV manufacturing here, and into also the battery recycling part of that, which is the biggest problem for them right now, given the China dependency, right? So so I would say to really closely look at the China-US trade policies that are put into place right now and in this administration, because I think that there will be more accomplished on that. I'm not feeling very optimistic about Build Back Better. I just am not right now. The other thing that I would do is say look very closely at the state policies up and down the Eastern Seaboard for offshore wind. I think that this is there's a lot of that's happening. It does require, rely on the federal permitting, but the one policy we have as a country is like, support the energy industry, and it's going to be hard for them to try to scotch that. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think as a business, as a sector, that has a lot of potential, and I think the policies coming up there are important. And I love California, and I think there's a lot of really great things going on there, but I think New York State is doing a lot of really wonderful things too, and look closely at those policies and see, especially research and development, like how the research and development, so another thing, what I would say is how the research and development of this priorities of this administration, I think those will very seriously affect what happens 10 years from now, and everything from carbon capture to EVs. So and
Okay.
hydrogen. Yeah.
All
Anyway.
right, sitting next to our time vault for the Biden administration story is a second time vault of 2. And it's the instructions you're going to give her on writing her companion story about the impact of the COP process on decarbonizing the global economy. Tim, what are you going to put in that time vault to tell the reporter 10 years from now?
Yeah. See, this is you know, you got to look at who's being real about these commitments and who's committing for the good look of it, for the PR of it. You know, you can make great commitments to, you know, you can say you're going to do all these great things to cut emissions and to, you know, more rely on renewable energy, but you got to look at the year by year. You got to look at what progress is actually made. So I think you got to take it on a country by country look, and then beyond that on an interactivity, you know, kind of look. And yeah, it's a tough question to think, you know, that far out in the future when everything can change so radically, you know, month to month, week to week.
You two don't appreciate this, but every one of my peers in the clean tech PR profession gets a subtle cathartic thrill when you're even temporarily stumped when I ask you these questions. It's just a very nice, mild role reversal for them, however vicarious. So, all right, Heather, your second time vault, what are you going to tell her?
Yeah, I would. There are 2 things for me that I think this person would want to look at very closely. One would be the Article 6 negotiations and the things that started happening there with the carbon markets, and sort of how they got accounted for, you know, allowing one country to build a project and then potentially selling it to other countries. So I think that whole carbon market framework is something that person should be looking at very closely, because I think that will matter in the years ahead, and maybe, in a decade ahead. I think that will matter. And the second thing I would say that they should look at very closely is understand is who was there and the impact that person had. And I'm not talking about who was in the room. I'm talking about the activists and the indigenous communities that were at COP but were not in those rooms. And I think if anyone's going to make this happen, those are the communities that are going to make it happen. The young people, the people that you know have everything to gain. They already have everything to lose, and they're going to lose it the way we're doing things now. And they have everything to gain by getting stuff done. And so I think that some of the leaders 10 years from now will be those people that were on the streets. And I hope they are. I hope they are, because they'll be getting things done.
You know, it's interesting, Heather, what you just said triggers perhaps our closing question here. But what I notice you two and the editors that we've had on our past 5 roundtables, I don't think anybody has ever volunteered this. I was listening to an NPR discussion about the merit of the whole COP process. I've been to 2 of them. I was in Denmark and Copenhagen, Cancun. And to me, they looked like a more dysfunctional version of the US Senate. You know, it was like 193 senators and everybody has a veto and everybody's got the filibuster. And it's just, you know, plus there's like 6 or 7 Metro State ringers there that are just determined to tank the process. And it's also monumentally boring. I mean, just rival the drying of paint as an art form. So what I don't hear you all volunteer is a sense of value in just the exercise, kind of raising the social expectation for commitments, for like being on the bandwagon. In other words, it's kind of like getting out of denial and at least into saying the right things, that there's a certain peer pressure. Is there merit in the peer pressure, so to speak, in the herd mentality dynamics that the COP process creates? Heather?
So I'm not going to talk about the country peer pressure. I'm going to talk about the corporation peer pressure, because that's where I spent most of my time at the meetings, was not in the meetings, but with all of the meetings around the meetings. And that was actually where actually a lot of the work got done. So you have the First Movers Coalition, which, got these companies, these large companies to say, hey, you know what, you come up with these things, we're going to buy it. and here's what we'll pay for it. And here's like, we're committing to do. Like, there were a lot of those kind of announcements around COP that were absolutely worthwhile. And I would definitely and they were there because the other stuff was going on, and they all kind of came out of hiding and COVID hiding to go there. And I think that was really important. So maybe, that's probably another thing that we should say is look at those meetings that happened around the meeting and follow up on those coalitions and those commitments. And that will be super important. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Well, I'm hearing a tacit yes. I'm hearing like there is a sense of like, there's a certain expectation raising quality to the comp process that extends far beyond the participating nation states. It actually goes to large NGOs, the financial industry, and Fortune 1000s.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't even know how much it got covered here. I was obviously there, so I don't know what the coverage was like. But yeah, I don't know.
Tim, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I can't really understate or overstate what Heather said there. It's about getting corporations on board. I think generally governments realize that at least within their populace, and I'm not speaking worldwide here. I'm a U.S. citizen. I know about the U.S. the best, and especially here, bipartisan, young people more so, but not necessarily just young people. People recognize the benefits of renewable energy, and now that it's economical, it's kind of become bipartisan. So I think it is about getting these corporations on board, these corporations that definitely move more slowly within their space, obviously because they have regulatory stuff to navigate and whatnot. But I think at least from an American perspective, the general populace is definitely in favor of renewable energy, and I think governments have realized that it is an issue that needs to be addressed and addressed quickly. And we have seen, at least on the ESG side, a lot of corporations recognizing the role that they play and, the role that they should play in transitioning to a clean economy. And I think now it's, going from recognition of the role to actually participating in change. It's a lot for a company to say, oh, we emit this much, we should be having big solar plants feed our data centers, and we should electrify our shipping fleet or whatever. But, when these changes are incremental and slow, and at some instances just posturing, it's like, we're saying we're transitioning, but we're doing the absolute bare minimum as slow as possible to, keep our income streams kind of steady as they've been, but also get people to go, wow, we're committing. And, so it's about real commitments. And I'm a bit cynical on the corporate side. But yeah, that's just what it boils down to.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Gerard Clark, who's sent us a couple of comments, noted how much tech is coming out, and he called for a cutting of oil and gas subsidies. Jared, I am 100% with you. Anyway, just want to thank you for sending those comments. And editors, I want to thank the both of you for joining us. Ditto with Zach, and I'm so sorry Darius couldn't join us. He's down for the count with his COVID booster aftermath, so we're going to give him a pass today. But Heather and Tim, please accept my thanks. And I think from all the people in the industry tune into these things, I just keep hearing over and over again how much people enjoy hearing from you in a structured way. Instead of just constantly chasing after you, they actually get to hear your minds and what you're thinking and what you're seeing. And hopefully in some indirect way, it can improve the quality of the pitches that get sent your way. I can't promise a reduction in inbox flow, but maybe we can improve the quality of them as they come in. So thank you both so much. And thanks for everybody out there for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we will be back in Q1 2022 with this esteemed group. We really appreciate the editors for joining on. Thank you, and happy holidays, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Happy holidays as well. Bye.